the fun
I'm
of the
gonna
show.
I'm gonna shit on George Nenny again for spiking my heart rate this morning.
Oh, I didn't know it was George Nenny. That is his kind of party. He's too
Right.
organized to have the wrong date.
I know. That's why my
If it
response
was
back to him
me, it would
quickly
make more
was like,
sense.
"I know you're kidding, man."
Brian, you should mess with him.
I will, because that would be more sincere coming from me. Yeah, I'm not the thing of
Brian, you
something.
should hit him up and
I
say,
see it coming.
"Oh my God, I thought you were covering for me today."
He's probably listening.
I'm gonna text him. Let's see if he gets into the. We'll find out if he puts it in the chat.
Just be like, "Hey, can you cover for me? I have an emergency."
And what's up, Drew? Got a yo coming from him.
Mr. Drew.
I figured this subject would get Drew's attention. Oh, it's not going to.
Oh, there we go. About to hit send. Thank you, George.
And thanks for all your help yesterday and this morning, George.
Yes, highly appreciate it.
If anybody wants to mess with George, just let him know that all your GA4 triggers have been blown out.
That's only if he set them up for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
If he didn't set them up for you, he's like, hell yeah, let me help you out there. It'll only cost
Right.
this much.
No, he helped us with a few things for some clients that he was working with, and it's interesting. Actually, I can't wait to hear what he has to say about that. Hopefully, he's talking about GA4, but
Yep.
what you can do with that after I was talking to him, and even just seeing what the Dealer Inspire team does with Brooke and everybody. I mean, it's it's going to do like a very unfair competitive advantage. You're either going to get your unfair
3
share
seconds, Brian.
or not. Okay.
All right. Now you're not cut off.
Cool.
So, hey,
No,
everybody.
but you're either going to get your unfair share of your GA4, or the people that aren't on board with everything that he's talking about are going to be at a distinct disadvantage, more than it ever has been before.
I believe that.
Well, I'm looking forward to next week. Like this week. I mean, we've got an action-packed schedule for the rest of the year going at Dealer Refresh, but I'm very excited about today's topic. I mean, you got service drive mining, which I obviously have quite a bias toward, but then some things to be concerned about with EVs. That's hitting me from a personal end. So,
You
And
were
some of those
also
flow together
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
with service
You were
drive.
well. Speaking of server drive, you were just at a fixed ops roundtable of some sort, right?
Oh, with Ted Inks, yes.
Yeah. How'd that go? Was there any major takeaways?
There was. I mean, I think it's been happening for a while now, where there used to be a distinct digital, difference between sales and service, and a lot more of the analytics and like the GA4 stuff was not being tracked as much. It was 4 or 5 years behind what sales was, because there's a lot more competitors. Everybody's focused on the variable side, and has been for a long time with CRMs, and there's just a lot more competition, where it's more blue ocean in the fixed ops area, and
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot more not the people that were on that call, obviously, but there's still a lot of legacy thinking, not just in the sales, but really in the service drive process, and a lot of disjoint where the whole tech stack doesn't flow together. And it seems like there's more and more progress being made there. And it's also where the service departments are so process driven that they are reluctant to change. But I now see especially some of the OEMs like Toyota with SmartPath service is brilliant because it's really taking the process and weaving it in and out of the technology rather than forcing technology on somebody, kind of like EVs, and forcing something down somebody's throat that may not want it and telling them that they should. Whereas they're really removing roadblocks in the service department and redundancies and data collection. And I think that there's less shiny objects in the service department than there is in the sales department. And service managers, parts managers, shop foremen are more reluctant. It really has to work and it really has to connect, and they're more skeptical. So I think that there's a little bit more refining on the integration piece, and there's more maturity when they actually, get into the fixed operations departments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, the fixed ops side of the business is black and white. It's broken or it isn't. And the sales side is I can only find a way to a yes, so we make everything gray.
And yeah, and they're trying to go, especially with marketing, and I think this is going to be the case for the next 5-6 years and beyond. There's limited amount of cars. It's like what I think I saw it was 8.5 million unit deficit that was vacuumed out in the last few years of demand that doesn't exist. In addition to the I think with 800,000 technicians I saw the other day, there's a deficit in the industry that need to be backfilled. Not even including what's coming with this whole transformation in terms of the EV transformation, because we need 800,000 internal combustion engine technicians, and that currently that's just for ICE engines. That's not mentioning what's going to happen over the next 5-10 years with EV introductions, to having to either evolve a workforce or attract an entirely new workforce to work on those vehicles.
I didn't realize it had gotten up to 800,000 people that we need in that line of work.
That's insane.
Yeah, so you really have to build. That was one of the main highlights. And you can't just say I'm looking for technicians. It's kind of like putting a banner in front of your dealership that says "We buy cars" and thinking that's the answer, or call for price. Like call me for the trade value. It's so good I can't tell you over the internet or virtually. It's that good we can't even share it. But which just forces everybody to go on other third-party large used car aggregator websites to get those values. Or now we see the top new car dealer groups, the publicly traded ones in the country that have franchise dealerships, are, without getting specific names, there's a few in the top 5 that are getting really, really strong at acquiring vehicles. And from what I'm seeing, are surpassing even Carvana and groups like that. So they have reinvented themselves, and they're providing exact numbers virtually, and then do an active trade appraisal when the client actually arrives in the dealership with the client, so that it's transparent. They're showing them side by side. Here's what it is, and here's why this happened, and this bumper's cracked, and this is how much it takes to replace it. And instead of negotiating, debating, it's more justification and transparency, and involving the client more in the process instead of going back behind a closed door in a glass sales tower. They're part of it, and they have some input to say, no, actually, that I've got an insurance claim for this windshield. I'll have it fixed tomorrow. Or, well, what if I went and fixed it by myself? You can do that, but at least you're having that type of conversation versus these wild swings. No, it's worth this. Somebody sets a deep anchor that's $5,000 more, and then it just causes friction and frustration between both parties.
Unless driving an EV.
Right. And then they're saying, well, how did my car drop $25,000 in a week?
Now it's worth $40,000 less.
I would say the crypto market is more stable right now than the EV resale value market. It's more reliable.
Good comparison.
There's a pattern to it.
Yeah, let me check my crypto right now.
Hey, and just like that, it could completely change tomorrow. And you look at it, you're like, what just happened? That's what happens with EV resale values. And we've had to get really aggressive at Accu-Trade into that space because predominantly, And well, I guess it's just a fact. We put more numbers on EVs than anybody else, which means you can't just wait for lag measured data. You can't wait for what happened at the auction. You can't wait for, you know, these sales to process through and come to maturity. And like with
Hmm.
us on uh, July 19th, when they announced the $10,000 price drop on EVs, that was at 9 a.m. I believe. If you're an Accu-Trade dealer
Yeah.
at 10 a.m., your values were up to date. If we take a look at Kevin Fry, I didn't know you were an NFT guy.
I'm sure he's not.
So, well, hey, at least it was good while you were there
Yeah.
on the when it was at the
Yes.
peak. I probably got that. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole. So if the Kia RoboDog, but when that happened at 10 o'clock, we were real time adjusted, right? And everybody was getting calls, phones blowing up. How, you know, your values are 15 grand too low. You know, what are you doing? Everybody else is here. And then hours later, some other, there's only, I think, 5
Mhm.
appraisal tools that actually guarantee a number. It's not just a guidebook. So when you go through that to get a guaranteed number, somebody's on a risky vehicle they actually don't want to keep, like many of these vehicles, because it is, unless you know every nuance of EVs, you really got to be a student of that game. It's like Jeff being in a Mercedes-Benz store, not knowing what every option and every package and the nuances of Designo versus this other stuff. So when they're looking for that, most other tools are going to say, we're not able to provide a value at this time because there's so much volatility. It's not logical. So it throws everything off a spectrum.
Mhm.
And there's sometimes 20% of cars, you know, most tools won't put a number on. We've got a team of analysts that all have 20 years plus, worked for Bob Hollinshead or with Bob Hollinshead for decades, all of them 20 years plus. So they live and breathe and die auctions all in, week in, week out. And in order to make those real time, like July 30th, everybody else had dropped 7 grand as we're still doing that. The Ford Lightning, for instance, on oh, no, that was the Ford Lightning. The Tesla Model Y drops that just happened recently on October 18th, I think is when that. Oh no, I'm sorry. That was July 19th. The On the Ford, the Model Y was what, 2 weeks ago? When that happened within an hour, we're real time. That still has not caught up. And because what's happening
Oh,
is
really?
on Lightnings, they're at 157 market day supply and 147 days on market. So when you have metrics like that, the bubble just keeps on expanding. It hasn't popped. At some point, somebody's going to say enough's enough, and they take 2 or 3 of those things to the auction that they're 20 grand underwater on because that's the month because they had a good month and they can wash it all out. And when you get 2 or 3 of those people, Jeff, you just saw it with EQSs, that go there and they say, fine, it's 160 days on the lot, just take it and because you got right now 70% no sale rate on a lot of those cars. So if
Mhm.
70% of them aren't selling every week, the auction averages don't change until that transaction actually occurs. So until that happens, you could have 70% of them not selling week in, week out, and everybody keeps on saying, well, average MMR is this. But nobody's willing to write you a check for that and have their own skin in the game. And that number,
Mhm.
what they'll guarantee versus what the recent auction transactions are 2 completely different things.
You got to wonder, like, I'm sure it's not done on purpose, but one of sort of the rabbit hole, one of the end goals is, you'll own nothing and be happy. And then you think about the EV market, and obviously it's going to make more sense to lease one versus purchasing one. So I wonder,
100%.
is that like sort of funneling, again, whether it's by accident or on purpose, but it's funneling people into, taking up the lease option a lot quicker.
I think it is, but is it really any different than I was at Mercedes Benz, and in the recession they came out with? Do you remember $25,000 dealer cash on CL 65s and S65s, right as the
Yeah.
economy was crashing? And what did it do to the resale values? The exact same thing these EVs. So I'll be the counterpoint on it, right? I was just the antagonist. I'll be the protagonist. it's just a different version of what we've always done. Everybody thinks it's so crazy. The only difference is the manufacturer is lowering the MSRP, or they could raise the MSRP, so they have more control over it. It's not dealer cash, because when you do it as dealer cash, the dealer has the discretion. Do they give it to the consumer? Do they not give it to the consumer? So this is like a very large rebate that they don't. You have to disclose a rebate, and they're just
Yeah.
skipping that step because there's no rebates on EVs yet. And I don't know if it has something to do with the tax incentives, but it's different, but it's also the same. They've got all that hard cost in terms of the R&D to get those cars there. It takes 7 years to go from concept to production. So it's not like they can just change and say, okay, we're going to turn off that assembly line and we're just going to switch it to ICE vehicles. I mean, it's a
Mhm.
massive undertaking. So they've got to see this thing through. And like we were talking about pre-call, Jeff, I think the technology is actually amazing. The torque, the 0 to 60, the technology that's within it. I don't personally have an EV, and I've got other concerns about owning one. But I will say that when I drive one, I mean, there's nothing like it in terms of acceleration,
Mhm.
torque simultaneously. Um, I think it's phenomenal. But I would only lease one. I would not
Oh
purchase
yeah.
one because you can't control
No.
that. And the manufacturers are going to
Exactly.
be able to control it on the other side because they've got all these different levers. They can adjust CPO programs. And you don't see Bank of America or Fifth Third leasing EVs. It's only going to be the manufacturer because there's multiple aspects to it. It's not just one. And
True.
I can remember during that same time, I leased an ML 500 and the bottom fell out on it. And I watched them lose $18,000 at the auction. So it was like putting a stop loss on a stock.
And
If it has equity, which is doubtful, that's great. But if not, you should. I think that Hyundai Ioniqs right now, all the good lease deals, when people are asking me, hey, what should I do right now? I tell them to lease an EV. And like, because that's what the manufacturer's putting all their incentive money towards.
Right.
it's
It's
true.
$2,800 per OEM on average, but it's not the same mix with EV and ICE. It's heavily
Hmm.
weighted towards EV.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if that will spike uh, in the near future used car leasing on EVs as well.
Well, they're setting the stage to be able to do it, right?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you control this part of it, you could control the secondary part of it as well. And the timing. If they knew that they were about to, I'm talking just philosophically, right? I don't want anybody to sit there and
Hmm.
think that I'm, for creating forward-looking statements, but if they know when they're going to drop the price, and dealers, if you use Accu-Trade, you can kind of dictate when they're going to drop the price because you can see the average days on market. And when the average days on market are much higher than the average market day supply, something's
Hmm.
going to happen. There's a big gap. Conversely, right after that, the average days on market typically drop, plummet, but the market day supply is still there because everybody's like, what just happened? I don't know how it's going to affect me. So there's still, trepidations about getting in the water. That's the perfect time to buy, right? I mean, the day after the Tesla Model Y dropped, if you can buy it at the Accu-Trade number the following day, you should load up. And you should load up from everybody else that's willing to let you acquire it for that because you're seeing 2 weeks ahead of where the market's going to be because it's eventually going to get there, but you should be in a buying mode. But that's really the closest you can get to it. But if they know when they're going to drop the price, I mean, and it's just a math equation: day supply,
Hmm.
days on market. When it gets to a certain point, they're going to drop, like Tesla did. They're going to drop the MSRP. When they know they're going to do that, obviously the ideal time to lease a used one or to do something like that and pull people out of their leases is right before they do that.
Good
But when you
point.
can
Yeah.
control every one of those levers or twist and turn these residuals, there's a lot of different ways they can go to make it make sense for them, internally.
Uh-huh.
Just kind of wonder. So when it comes to a lot of the progressive economic things that we're starting to experience in the United States, Europe has been here already. So they've pushed a number of things, and we're sort of following their model in a lot of ways. Now you've got some European countries that are starting to pull back on the timeline around EVs. They were pushing for the 2030 mass
2030.
adoption. Now they've officially gone to 2035, and will we see that continue to extend?
Well, obviously, I've got skepticism on a lot of the things that are going to happen that never end up happening. I mean, did we hit the 2025 cafe standards that were mandated?
No.
Nobody ever said if we did or we didn't, right? They just moved the goalpost and said,
Why?
"Hey, don't
If
forget
we
about that. We're
had,
doing this now."
yeah, if we had, it would have been heralded to the heights.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. They would. Everybody would have taken credit for it, and whenever everything goes well, everybody takes credit for it. Like if this was a Wall Street company that was claiming they were going to be, cafe standards achieved by 2025, and nobody did, somebody would be asking some questions, right? I mean, the question that I would
Mm-hmm.
ask is, if we don't hit it by 2030, who's responsible? Is it the administration that's not currently in office, or whatever Congress, Senate, or whatever the people that are mandating down? Is it the OEMs that are responsible? So there's not really anywhere that, okay, on this date in 2030 we're going to come in, and if this is not achieved, these are the penalties, or this is what happens. Because it's a, what do they say, a goal without a deadline and someone accountable is a dream.
Mm-hmm.
So all they have to do in 2029 is what they do every decade, and say, no, it's not going to be like that. Now it's every car has to have solid state batteries by 2040, and that's the new goalpost that we're going to move it to. So when you're not when you're not responsible, there's no accountability, and you can say whatever you want, and you can make all these claims of whatever you want, because there's no repercussions. Specifically, it might be some tax implications, but
Mm-hmm.
the tax benefits are getting presented now, and I'm not an economist, but there's tax breaks to build new facilities here, to build EV. I mean, there's obviously all this renewable energy stuff, that solar, credits that are happening. So they're trying to drive all these things. I guess I love the technology. I love how it drives. Like Jeff was saying earlier, I love the content within the vehicle. I don't like the resale values. I don't like the volatility in the market in terms of trying to run a used car business, and and in one day you can lose hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on what one or two people decide they want to do. There's
Mm-hmm.
certain canaries in the coal mine, but there's only a handful of people on earth that know what's about to happen. And you can't have a 60-day turn. Like EVs that need to have a 30-day turn. You just can't have them that long. You need to have better analytics and diagnostics like we have to be able to monitor the life of a battery. We had a dealer in Kansas City avoided a $30,000 mistake by measuring the life of the battery and saying that he wasn't interested in it. And they went to another dealership, and somebody who didn't have that technology bought that vehicle. And I'm sure 6 months after they bought it, they came back and were losing their mind because they spent $50,000 on a car
Mm-hmm.
that needed a $30,000 battery that they had an 84-month loan on. And you could say that you have to disclose if something's not safe or drivable. That should be something that needs to be disclosed by FTC prior to selling. Hey, by the way, you have It's not like tires, where tires are $1,200. Hey, in 3 months, your 30,000 batteries are going to need to be replaced. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just not right. And the other thing is, to your point earlier, Alex, is forcing people into a technology like a laser disc player, where they're already
That's a
halfway
good.
through designing the next iteration of the DVD player, which will then turn into streaming video. And they know these things are going to happen, yet they're forcing everybody to buy a Laserdisc player that they know is going to be obsolete in 4 or 5 years. When I didn't hear
Brian,
the
sounds to me like you fell for that laser disc player.
I did. I had the one that flipped over.
They were nice. They were
Yeah.
fantastic.
Had to,
Advanced
I didn't want to have
laser.
to walk 3 feet over and flip it over, so I paid like an extra $800.
That's
Yeah,
right. You
Drew's right.
did have
Have
to
you ever
flip them.
seen it?
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
It was high def before high def existed.
that's
Only
right.
way you could get it.
yeah. It was fantastic,
But
no doubt about it. But that
then I
disc
had
was,
to get the DVD
I mean, it's
player that
almost
was
the
way
size of
too
a
much.
record.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, so you
So
had mentioned something, and I was doing some research around it. And I don't know. You have to let me know if have to let us know if Accu-Trade looks at that. But apparently, I guess there is a way, obviously, to measure the quality of that battery. Whenever I was doing some research, I came across, I guess, a service out there called Recurrent, and I guess it dials into the system, and it figures out I guess, the quality of that battery, and then it's able to actually turn around a score. And of course, that score is going to be based on a percentage. So maybe it's 95%, 90%. So, basically 90% of that battery is still good. It will still perform 90% up to what the manufacturer said it should perform whenever purchased new. Is that, does Accu-Trade look at that, or what's, because I'm totally do not know how this technology works. Um, my guess is
I've
you're
had to,
probably quite familiar with it.
so I've had to go down this rabbit hole and met with Recurrent and at cars.com. We're fans and we've talked to them about,
Oh, really?
integrations and
Oh, okay.
their data. We're fans of their data. And
Okay.
the cool thing about Recurrent is what they do now is eventually going to be able to be done at some level. It's kind of like solid state batteries. It's like you can see it on the horizon, but it's just not there yet. And so they do over the air updates, which every OEM can theoretically do. Like I've got a Ford Bronco, I can diagnose my tire pressure. It'll tell me what my mileage is. It'll tell me, this is one of the things that was on that fixed ops roundtable. It'll tell me what my battery life is. Uh, but if you think about from a data, what's the life of my actual battery? My right now I need a nail. I have a nail in my back rear tire. It keeps on reminding me about that, sending me notifications from the app. Whenever I land on back in Fort Myers Airport, I hit the button to start it up. So because it's hot, the AC is already running. By the time I get into my car, it's already ice cold. Things like that. But when you have all that kind of data and you start going into a connected car / IoT, Internet of Things, and you can connect the data in that app to when you pull up to your house, that it unlocks your door, turns your lights on late at night, and all the other things that are possible with that. It also enables an EV battery to be diagnosed remotely. And pretty much every car since 2018 has this capability, but there's some controversy around who owns that data. And West Virginia has probably the most forward thinking when it comes to this, and they're ahead of the game more than anybody else. But it's a state by state legislation rule as to whose data that is. A perfect world, look like Toyota Smart Path service. And Toyota, did we lose you?
I think so.
He gets sucked into the internet like that
Keep on rolling.
chocolate bar,
Back.
the Willy Wonka bar in that movie. Oh, he's back.
Got kicked off.
So, so when you can diagnose the battery life remotely, like SmartPath for Toyota, that's the ideal way to do it, because I think these OEMs are going to eventually, just like a DMS, will sell partners, a monthly subscription to be able to grab that data to be able to populate it. Because SmartPath service is phenomenal. You pull up into the dealership. Well, I'll give you another example. I went to Ed Roberts' store, who was on the Fixed Ops Roundtable up in St. Augustine. I wanted to see, he's regarded as one of the best fixed ops minds in the world, and I will agree that that's the case. So I wanted to put him to the test. I didn't tell him that I scheduled an appointment. I just wanted to see it organically play out, and it was more impressive than I thought it would be. I went to the quick service lane, which was across the street. I had my odometer written down and my VIN written down. All I did was give him my phone number, and he said, "I'm showing your mileage is this." He didn't walk out to the car. This is within seconds of me getting checked in. And he said, "You got low tire pressure and your rear right tire on the other nail I had to replace." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "So I'm going to try to plug it, but do I have your approval prior to that to just go ahead and replace it?" And he knew everything about my car. So in the next iteration, when you go in the tech stack in the future, or right now a Toyota Smart Path, they will already know your VIN. They will already know you. They will already know your behavior, what your radio stations are. It's all there. It's all in a big CSV file that can get exported somewhere. No, every option in your car is a subscription or hard equipment. Anything you've ever done, almost need a HIPAA law against
Yeah.
sharing your car information. Going to offer you, and this is already happening. Tesla is the furthest ahead of this. Toyota is right behind them. We're going to give you, if you get Toyota insurance or Tesla insurance, and Tesla's insurance is insanely easy. I don't have one, but I've mystery shopped it. They're going to start making money in a big way on that. They're looking at other revenue streams that don't currently exist. And there's a lot more like that you could talk about, where they're going to monetize other industries because they already have the audience, and they're going to maximize Tesla's first party data to help automate other parts of their business in a highly profitable way in a completely SaaS format where there's nobody has to do anything. It's just the customer pointing and clicking because they have so much consumer data. But you'll be able to do that
Yeah.
with diagnostics, EVs. Recurrent can do that now. With Accu-Trade, we use our OBD2 device to do that. So you have to actually plug it in, but then it's completely integrated to the rest of the experience.
You'll be able to buy your Tesla and start your new Tesla from the X app.
Yeah. No, you'll be. They're going to completely monetize that app with crypto, Kevin, Brian.
Yeah.
I have it right up to us.
And NFTs.
Well, they just announced, I mean, this is sort of off the path here, but they just announced that they had applied or maybe was approved for some type of infrastructure that allows them to do all the payment processing. And apparently most of that infrastructure was actually already built even prior to him acquiring Twitter X.
Like a Venmo or something like that, right? So
Yeah.
Kevin Fry's right.
Called X. That's, I mean, that as soon as he changed the name of Twitter, he was like, if you knew his payment company was called X, I'm like, okay,
yeah. Well, he went back and repurchased the X.com.
Right.
But Kevin Fry's right, because it's not really clear who does the OEM own the data, does the dealer own the data, or does the consumer own the data? Well, it depends by state. And right now, that's part of the reason why not everybody has, because there's a lot of data that I can tell you we want and we'd like to buy. And there's also a lot of data that the OEMs would like to sell, but it depends on what state, it's really fragmented, worse than tag and title is. But the one thing about what Kevin said, data is definitely the crude oil of the next century.
Yeah. Yeah. All of our data. Right. I don't know. Is Tesla offering, can you trade in with them now?
Yes.
Really? Does it have to be a Tesla or can it be something else?
It can be anything.
Oh, really?
And that's an interesting thing you say, Jeff, because I'm obsessed with a lot of this stuff, right? I'm going to own an EV. I do have a Vanderhall Brawley. That's not really a real car on order, but from an actual your everyday a Vanderhall Brawley, it's an SUV, looks like a little military vehicle.
Oh, not familiar. I'll have to look it up.
But that's not going to be. I'm not comfortable driving that every single day. Is that my primary mode of transportation? If I have to drive to Tampa or to Miami or for Orlando, or I have to stop and sit there for 30, 45 minutes and just charge, I'm not into that. But along those lines, I don't necessarily, and I would love any counterpoints in the chat on this. I talk to friends about this all the time. I don't think, as Tesla has been growing, and it's an interesting case study. They have the Tesla Model Y, which is now the fourth highest volume vehicle, not EV, but it's outselling the RAV4 year to date. So the only things that outsell the Model Y currently, and it's like a Trojan horse. It's happened so slowly. I don't think a lot of people are even aware of it because it's not showing in most market share reports or most competitive formats because they don't consider Tesla not a dealership. So they exclude them from all this stuff, which I think was a gigantic mistake because it wasn't everybody's radar to say, wait, you see how many registrations they're doing? You see how fast they're growing? This exponential click. So they're worried on some ICE competitor when they should be worrying about Tesla selling and servicing vehicles in the market. Now, conversely, while that's happened, and it's been like 50%, 40%, year in, year out, 60%, it's just so elastic. And they've taken so many people that normally wouldn't, and there's still, I guess, 15 or 20% that trade within 6 months, but there's 80% that don't. And they like that. So after you've already, pretty much bought a Tesla like you would buy an iWatch or AirPods on the Apple website, which is pretty much what it is. Imagine doing that, trade in your car, you submit the online lead, it exactly what they told you it was going to be. And they don't keep any inventory because they don't sell used cars. They just wholesale it all. We
Yep.
see all the the trickle down of that. But here's the bigger thing that I think the dealers need to be on high alert for. So if they were able to just select the options, there's no negotiation. They can add whatever they want, subscription. They don't have to talk to somebody. They can if they want to, like an Apple Genius. But for the most part, if they want to, they can do it all themselves. Now imagine you want to get out of that vehicle. You might have some resent over the fact that they drop their prices all the time, and now your vehicle that you had a lot of value in is now one of the best values on the used car market, which it is, because anything that's 2016 or below is a better value than most of its ICE competitors in the same weight class. But on the next vehicle, you got to compete with the experience. So they just went through the most frictionless experience that there is. Now, it might not be post sale for service, but it's not as bad as people make it out to be. And now you've got to go back into a dealership with a traditional legacy. When can you come in? Well, can't you just give me an idea what my trade's worth? Well, it's never going to be worth more than it is right now. I need to see you face to face. When's a good time, right now or a little bit later? And they keep asking those questions and they're not getting the answers. Maybe they go to CarMax or Carvana and they get those answers, which we see when they bounce off of a GA4, George, as they bounce at that experience if it's a ballpark range and they want to get closer. But the worst experience is they get all through all that stuff and they said, you know what, it's just not worth it. I guess I don't care as much what car I drive. Let me just get back on the Tesla website and see how much it would be to get another Tesla. Because you're not necessarily comparing the product, you're more comparing the process at that point. Because
Mhm.
the product is the product, right? And I think that is why Tesla's growing at the click that it is because it's so easy. And I think that franchise dealers, and I've seen it in many markets where they are really hurting Tesla. They're really hurting Carvana. They're really hurting, the larger groups because they're offering a exceptional experience. But I don't see that across the country, and I see a lot of defending why things are the way they are, rather than looking outside the industry at, like Tesla's not comparing themselves to a dealership with what they're doing. They're not comparing selling them all insurance in a SaaS format. They're just looking at how does Geico operate and what does their website look like? And then mobile service, which people like Ed Roberts, I think he's got another 8 service vehicles going. He's in a town of 17,000. He services 10 to 12,000 cars a month, 10 to 12,000 ROs in a town of 17,000. Think about that. He services, I don't know what the numbers are in Jacksonville, but that's 45 minutes away. But he's got to be servicing as many vehicles up there remotely as that dealership is, or the dealerships up there are. So he's finding a way, just like Tesla is. And I don't think there's enough innovation these days and people looking to disrupt themselves. As David Spizak says, disruptors don't come in with a sledgehammer and bust down your door. The door's already wide open and you just waltz right in and they let you. And just like we did with Tesla, well, what are they going to do? Right? They have EVs. It's not even a real car. Or so as Kevin said, what's the biggest driver of EV sales? Tax credits, perception. The tax credits, as Elon Musk has said, I don't. He doesn't know why they do them. And he goes, I'll take the money, but I don't see the point. And just gave him that much more margin in order to get it, so it appeals more. But Kevin, I think it's not. You'll get the result of whatever question you ask. And in resulting, if you want a result to be something, you'll ask the questions in a certain way subconsciously, and you'll arrive at that conclusion. But when I'm asking people agnostically, because I'm just curious and not trying to be biased one way or the other, for me, once you peel back the layers, and they might say, "Oh, I'm just all about going green or going that stuff." Ultimately, when I ask why the 5 whys, it comes down to it was just so easy, and most of them didn't even intend to buy the car. I mean, I have a good friend of mine who's a used car director and has been used cars, and he got on the site just to mystery shop it and ended up buying the Tesla in the process. And I said,
Shut up.
"Really? You bought a Tesla?" And he goes, "Brian, I'm telling you, it was so easy." He goes, I'm telling you, you should get on it. I go, "I did. I almost did it." And because it's just they remove all the roadblocks to like, wait, what's about to happen? It happened so fast, and it was so
Huh.
easy. And I think that's a gigantic part of it.
Well, I
Would
think
make sense, I guess.
you get no argument from any of the commenters that there needs to be change. It's just what is the right change? in the
and
dealerships. That is.
Kelly Wilson is dead on. Audi should be pushing for leases on 100% of their EVs because that e-tron's a phenomenal vehicle, but it's not phenomenal if you bought it, and it's not
Oh, really?
phenomenal on your used car lot.
Hmm.
I thought that was one of the top EVs with the highest resale value. Of
It probably
course,
is
that
one of the top EVs with the best content.
you
It's
know that
gorgeous.
yeah, that could have been months ago, and now it's completely different. So
That's the challenge with these cars is that what it was
yeah,
3 weeks ago, completely different. And there's some
yeah.
that sell incredibly well. And Rivians sometimes they go up in value depending on what the other EV companies are doing. But the one thing that I'll say for sure is that everybody reacts and is Tesla and Elon Musk are setting the tone, and everybody else adjusts accordingly. But there's no question who the lead dog in that pack is, because whatever happens with Tesla, we watch it across the whole spectrum in that all segments of EV react accordingly. It's not just we lowered the price of the Model Y and Model Ys went down. Model Ys affect every EV
Everything
produced as a ripple effect.
makes sense.
The only vehicles this year that are outselling Model Y is the Ford F-150, the Chevy Silverado, and the Ram 1500, and then it's Tesla Model
Trucks.
Y, and then Rav4, Camry, but the Model Y is that popular.
Hmm.
I had no idea.
Well, I so definitely I can see that here where I live. And there's no Tesla dealer nearby. They're looking to put one in soon. Um, but for this little population where I'm at, Burlington, Vermont's like 30,000 people, 50,000. We've got all the colleges here. Those college kids aren't buying Teslas, but
True.
it's not just Subarus here anymore. So Subarus and Teslas.
I
Yeah,
was gonna say I'm surprised Vermont doesn't have a Tesla dealer, or at least Burlington area.
yeah, they're all going to Boston.
Yeah, Drew says they're all trucks, trucks, trucks. Hey, I never had a truck until I got a Tacoma. Now I'll probably never go back.
Yeah,
Best
I
resale
can't
value there
imagine
is.
not having a truck in the
Yeah,
driveway. But I live out in the country.
yeah,
But I also
yeah.
can't imagine having an EV. Um, the
No,
inconvenience
not
of
yet.
ownership, and I've heard it from so many EV owners, is a real thing. Like I want to get in the car and have a 5 minute fill up and be good for another 3 to 500 miles. I don't want to spend time having to plan things out around how do I keep this thing charged up. I do
And
a lot
in
of
terms
long
of
drives. So
when you charge up is a completely different situation as well. You can't just get down like on your phone and get to 75% battery life and charge it back up. That
right.
graphene mesh, I guess, that's inside those battery cells. Every time you charge it, there's some loss of deterioration. So
Mhm.
it's not as bad as it used to be, on like old school camcorders where if you didn't take it all the way down to charge it back up, the battery's cooked. But there's an element of that, and you've got a lot of people that might not be as educated and they might not put as much of an emphasis on it that, hey, you got to make sure this thing gets down to 30% before you charge it up. If not, you could really affect your battery life. That's one of the things that Recurrent does is they
Yeah.
advise on that as to, kind of manage to help that out, which is, I think is much needed. And that's a huge weakness of Tesla because they have the product specialists at their locations. If there's a location near you, to your point, Alex, but if there's not, and you're just going to pick it up and get out of there, there's a lot more that you need. It's a whole lifestyle change. You got to get, in many cases, your circuit breakers, the whole different line, like a generator added to your house. And I mean, it's a real lifestyle adjustment.
Hmm.
And if you're at 75% and you got to take it down to 30, that's even more inconvenient with the disruption
Yeah.
of you when you have so little downtime these days. It's but here's what I heard the other day, and I wasn't at the Toyota dealer meeting. Don't go to them anymore. But what I was told is that the solid state batteries for Toyota are a lot closer uh, than everybody thought. and that was accelerated. And that really is the answer. And that's the most frustrating thing to me with a lot of this EV downward pressure with tax credits. If you just let this thing play out organically, like all the debates about healthcare and just really, capitalizing everything and making, companies instead of two or three competitors, just opening it up and deregulating it like electricity. And then it's going to be better for the consumer.
Mhm.
It's going to be better for the dealers. And there's not going to be, and really for every taxpayer, you don't have to do all these tax credits because it'll just work itself out. And if it is the best way to go, then people will buy them regardless of the tax credits. And that's really the ultimate thing. But solid state batteries were going to come out in 2030 anyway. So all of this is that, and solid state batteries is the streaming music, or actually, I would say hydrogen and the like Toyota Mirai is the streaming music. Solid state batteries will be here for a long time, but it's going to make every EV on the market obsolete when solid state batteries come out.
All right. So I'm gonna keep driving my diesels. Got it.
All day long.
Up until that comes around. But it's funny you bring up hydrogen or hydrogen as the Europeans like to call it.
True.
I just heard the other day that and it was yeah it was an economist speaking to this, and he was talking about the three major energy sources for vehicles and how uh, he was saying like hydrogen still requires a massive uh, creation of pollution at the initial creation of it, even more so than the creation of electricity from like coal power plants. And he was making the argument that still petroleum is the cleanest thing for the environment to this day overall. And just because that one comes out of a tailpipe and people can actually see it, they
Mm-hmm.
associate that with the most polluting, but not the case.
Yeah, I'd like to see what are the top 25 forms of pollution. I haven't done that, but if you're running a business, you're going to start with the top three, right? Whatever
Cow
those are.
farts.
Could be cow farts, could be private jets, it could be cruise ships, whatever it is. But you don't have, if you looked at it without the through the lens of a lobbyist, you would just go attack the biggest rocks first. But obviously, we can't do that, and that's utopia, and that's not going to happen. But the one thing that I would say for dealers is you got to be either in the EV used car business or you need to decide to be out of it because toe dipping it and not
Yeah.
knowing it inside and out is a dangerous road to go down. And you either need to find the best end user and wholesale those vehicles, or you need to, and everybody's gonna have to do it on new cars anyway. You need to commit to finding the right lenders and the right technicians to recondition these, the right way to be able to pull build sheets, plug in or over the air, measure these batteries. And you need to have a strategy and also a sales force on the used car side. Because I know OEMs are pushing on the new car side. You go into, because I'm in dealerships 3 or 4 days a week, and you ask a used car salesperson all about EVs, and they're either going to kick you to new cars and try to flip you, or they're going to just try to, use a crescent wrench to get you into an ICE vehicle and question why you even want an EV really before trying to understand it. And it's not because they maybe they believe more in nice vehicles because they can explain a nice vehicle, but they can't explain an EV and they're not willing to. And that's a major industry transformational change that
Mm-hmm.
there's exceptions to the rule that we're not ready for overall as a country.
No.
Yeah, there's a lot of lagging things in sales departments right now, unfortunately. You're still trying to get over the COVID side. By the way, I saw a stat on that front last week. So I've been all along since the pandemic been saying there's been a 15% reduction in dealership sales staffs. It's been more than that. I wasn't aware of just how much it was. So the average dealership had 17.4 salespeople, or not salespeople, the whole sales team, finance department, managers,
Mm-hmm.
that prior to the pandemic. What do you think they're down to now, on average?
13.
Got a guess, Jeff?
I was gonna say 12, 12.5.
11.
Wow.
right back to where we were in the recession.
Yeah, so we
Yeah,
lost six heads and still expected to do the same job, same lead volumes, all that stuff. Yeah,
that's just not our industry either.
right. So yeah, and we might have to, we got to educate them on the types of vehicles for sure, and EVs in the used market. But yeah, we're asking a lot.
I mean, it's in many cases, as I'm going around the country and asking, and people are asking about EV values and what's the retail strategy on it. And I don't think it's something that's talked about enough is that you got to change your whole exit strategy. You can't have the same turn. You can't be willing to keep it for the same amount of days. You need to calculate what's daily depreciation on that particular vehicle. That's something that we focus on heavily at Accu-Trade is sharing what's the average days on market and then multiplying that times the average daily depreciation rate. Because right now, like on Ford Lightnings, it's $168 a day of depreciation. So if that's still what's going on, okay, well, I'm going to wait and I'm going to see because MMR is that much higher than whatever you're telling me. Okay, well, you already had it for 100 and something days. At some point, something's going to have to happen. And if you do decide to keep for another 30 days, here's the data, which is extremely accurate. Let's just say it's $100 a day. If it's $100 a day and it does take you another 30 days to sell it, which is or in 30 days you take it to the auction, it's going to lose another 3 grand in the meantime. If you all these cars, because the average days or market days on market is 156 or what I think I'm pretty sure that's what it is. If you take that times 150, what's that? 3,000 or more. That's no 22,000, no 2,250, right? So
Yeah,
if you take that and then you multiply it times 150 days, that's $15,000, which is what everybody's losing on these cars because they're keeping them too long because they're using an ICE traditional mindset of used car retail and not speeding it up. And they go, oh, maybe I'll keep it 90 days. It's certified, so I'll keep it 120. Well, that could be a $15,000 mistake versus wholesaling it immediately and either breaking even or making some money. But everybody's like, well, we don't wholesale cars. I only retail them. We're not wholesalers, we're retailers. And dealers, if they're not willing to get a sales staff that is able to execute that, a, a speed to market recon process that's able to get them through the shop quickly enough because they know those cars inside and out, or they know how to figure out what's the Monroney label and they can pull the MSRP of Teslas and be able to diagnose it, which requires a different interface on a Tesla Model S or Model Y to be able to do the OBD, even with us, to be able to do that full diagnostic. If you don't take the time, just like to establish a BDC department or an acquisition department on the service drive. If you're not willing to invest the time, energy, and the staffing around that, it's much easier just to, and I'm just being real, because I see
Yeah.
these sometimes 100, 200, $300,000 losses in a month on EVs because they're trying to manage it like an ICE retail strategy, and it's not the same. It's not anything uh, similar, except for having a car in your lot and advertising and marketing it.
So what I hear you saying is if you don't have a solid process set up for selling EVs, especially mainly used EVs, a quick turnaround, you maybe you shouldn't take the approach that we're only a retailer and not a wholesaler.
What does Tesla do?
Yeah,
There's a lot of money that they could be making.
that's true. Yeah. Hmm.
But the risk, some actuarial sat there and said the
We
risk isn't
haven't,
worth the reward.
I don't think we've sold any full EVs. We've sold quite a few hybrids, which, I wish that would have been more the approach that we took is to, slowly migrate over to more of a hybrid and then, maybe go full electric. But we sold quite a few hybrids and it's weird because I see the market, at least within my area, I see a stronger market for hybrids than for EVs currently. Um,
What
but
about used EQSs?
we have not sold, although we did put a few of them into our service for loaner vehicles, but I don't believe we brought them out yet. So that's something else. A lot of the manufacturers will say, especially Mercedes Benz, they want you to put an X amount of vehicles into your your loaner fleet.
So,
So you
I sometimes wonder with Mercedes, Jeff. This is a crazy theory, maybe, but a lot of people buying EVs are kind of like look at me people, like original Prius owners. They
mm-hmm,
look at me. I'm
mm-hmm,
great for the
initially. Yep.
whatever. Yeah, and I think we're cresting that hill, but Mercedes buyers aren't usually that way. That's more of a BMW profile. You know, people who buy BMWs are more like, yeah, look at me, I got a Beamer. Mercedes people want to, they just want to ride around in nice luxury and not really be the center of attention. At least that's been my experience with them.
What are you
Maybe I'm wrong.
smoking, dude?
No, okay.
Almost
so,
everyone buys a Mercedes is a look at me person.
I
so
haven't known any of them
Jeff,
that
on that same loaner car note, this is something that we've been working on. How painful is it putting the right cars into what do they call it, MBAT, and I think it's or all trans. So putting it in and then bringing them out, and a lot of times you're like, okay, well, I took this EQS and I put it in there, right? We're and I don't want anybody to hold me to this, but we're fairly close on a software to help dealers manage that from a standpoint of which cars should you put in, and then what can you expect from a 6 month, whatever the cutoffs are, right? 180 days, for 181 days, the 108, 365 days. So if I put in this car today, what's the least amount of risk? Am I looking to move and you got to establish your goal. I got to move my either aged inventory and put it in. How much is that going to cost me if I want to get rid of this problem today, but I know I have to deal with it later, like a residual with an OEM? Or
Mhm.
how do I order a year out or 6 months out or whenever the initial, I think October for January allocation for the following year is when it starts. What months should you put those cars into all trans service? Because putting in at a Toyota store, for instance, right now, you want to put in all Siennas, but you really want to put it in whenever there's a body style change, right? So the Tacoma is going to change in December. So if I'm looking at it through Accu-Trade's lens, Tacomas always hold great. I mean, there's still 77% residuals on like 4 years, even with an old body style. But
Mhm.
how much demand is there going to be on the next generation Tacoma? So last December or November, I would have not taken any loaner cars from May until October. And then I would have waited until November, December to take only new body Tacomas, the 2024 models.
Yeah.
Our Accu-Trade software is going to tell dealers what's your ideal uh, drop-off points. Should you abstain for 6 months from taking any loaner cars and then load up heavy on these and not just put in 4 a month or 10 a month on an even basis because it's convenient and you want to cycle them through in a traditional linear format, but actually using AI and using data points like days on market, average daily depreciation, and use a scientific approach to where you could actually make money instead of losing money every single month in loaner car expense. You'd actually be getting credits, and our software will tell you that.
That's extraordinary. That's awesome. Yeah, I never even considered that, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Huh.
way.
Huh. Yeah.
And those are the ways how service, I think, is going to intersect with sales more. And that's a prime example.
Yeah. Um, just to shift a little bit because we're coming up on the hour. Any different approaches that you would recommend with acquisitions, particularly with the new car situation and a bit of the influx with the strikes?
Well, that's a great question. We were just reviewing that with the cars.com leadership team. And it looks like all the OEMs have been loading up for a while anyway. Obviously, they've been anticipating this. And
Mm-hmm.
as everybody on this call knows, that all of them have a war chest to be able to ride this thing out for a while, like a siege. But number one, most the brand and searches, because obviously whatever's online is going to get the most SRPs, is Stellantis. If you add up Dodge, Chrysler, and and Ram together. They've
Okay.
got the most product on the ground. I think it's like 16% or something, 17%. After that's Ford, which is 14 something percent of the inventory that's on the ground today. And then after that's General Motors. So they're, and I forget what the day supplies are, but they're anywhere from 70 to 90 days when I was looking at it.
Okay.
So they've got 3 months worth of inventory before anything starts getting dicey. And not all cars are produced with those brands in North America. I mean, there's like a large amount of Silverados, which is the number one selling vehicle, that are built in Mexico. And you can say the same ththing as you start breaking down each model. Where is this thing built? How many are built in Canada?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it, I think, is media hype because it's a juicy topic. But when you actually look at it from a business standpoint, car dealers are insanely resilient.
Okay.
Yeah, just like it has been for a long while now, like Kelly's saying. Now, I think
Mm-hmm.
the external factors and these big high overviews, because they'll be able to get enough cars from their vehicles from Canada, Mexico, and all the other places where these one-offs are built. But the who blinks first, I don't. I think the OEMs have been more than fair with those offers. I think they're actually ridiculous. So I would put that on the UAW is going to have to, because it's they'll go out of business if they agree to those terms. I'm not a labor union expert or whatever, but what they're asking for is the exact same, to go back in time to 2008, right before they went bankrupt and caused had to be bailed out by the government. They want to reinstitute all that stuff from a
Mm-hmm.
business standpoint. And somebody could sell me on it, but they they can find those vehicles, or they can try to make that make sense. I don't see how it would happen. But yeah, Alex Vetter's completely right. They have to shift to sourcing cars through service drive, through private party, and not just relying on trades, and start building buy centers on their websites. Ones that are step 1, step 2, step 3, a video of this is how we do business. This is how we're going to go to market. We have a dealer with Accu-Trade that's acquiring 30 to 50 cars a month in Sarasota, Florida. It's just one person. And it's so disruptive. And everybody's always like, this, I don't know what they're doing or what they're telling people. I don't know how they're acquiring this many cars. And literally, it's just this one man. And so I'm trying to figure out what's his secret. So I called him up, and he said, "Hey, I'm just real simple. I call them up, and if they can't make it in, I tell them that I can be to them within 24 hours. In most cases, I go to them within 2. And I tell them it's going to be the easiest acquisition they've ever done in their lives." He said, "I've got a lot of things stacked against me because I don't have a big name. They're already skeptical of dealers. I have to bring my dealer." They question whether or not I'm even a real dealer. I got to bring my Sunbiz, my dealer license to show them that I'm legit. I tell them, I live and breathe and die off my dealer rater, Google and Facebook reviews, and use that as his third party thing. And he said, "But here, I can't compete with what everybody else is doing. What I can do is make it the easiest transaction you've ever done in your life to sell a vehicle." So now he's been on this, and he was at a real pain point a year ago when he signed up with us. He wanted to work service drive. I said, how many ROs do you write a month? He goes, "I don't know, 5 a week." I go, 500, 20, 50. He goes, "No, I said 5. I'm like, "So 22? He goes, "Yeah." I go, "You gonna work that service drive?" And he does. And he actually acquires a decent amount of vehicles. And not only does he go to the client's house, and the biggest source of his business is he's going to, there's multiple dealers in some cases, because they get on multiple websites. They either didn't call the client back, or they told them they have to come in before they give an exact number, and they don't show up. So he just goes to them and he goes, "I just do what I said I was going to do." And then I have him follow me to the local Chase branch, and I get him a cashier's check. He goes, "And it's not any more complicated than that." He goes, "But there's such a craving from the consumers for dealers just to do what they said they were going to do and be transparent and just give them the information that they wanted." And that's going right back to the data thing that we talked about, being the crude oil of the 20th century. How much data are dealers giving away by letting them go to another website that does provide a guaranteed value? Let's say Carvana, CarMax is an example, AutoNation USA, versus just collecting and gathering that data themselves. And even if it's not Accu-Trade, letting somebody power a link to provide, instead of a range, you can give them a range, and then if they want to go further, don't let them bounce to somebody else's website. Let them go further on your own website. And that's the reason why DR tools don't work, because they bounce at the trade. It's not that a DR is a lead gen. It's the fact that most dealers force it to be a lead gen because if you want an exact value to be transactional, like Tesla, and you
Yep.
can't, what other option do you have? And you've got to provide the consumers those options. And I think that's the moral of the story. That makes you resilient, impervious to any outside external factors like labor unions, strikes, franchise issues, tsunamis. You'll never ever be affected. And I work with so many amazing dealers, especially independents, that I had no idea how they did business. And I realize now why they're able to source cars, which to me would seem crazy before working at cars.com and really roll my sleeves up and getting into the dirt with these guys. They're phenomenal operators. They scrap and they claw, and they don't have the option that a lot of franchise dealers do to pass on a trade because they're the ones
Yeah.
that told them up at the auction when everybody's like, "What? How are they going to pay that much?" They're just they figure it out.
That's great.
Mm-hmm. Well, Brian, thank you for your time today and all the insights you bring every time you're on.
No,
Yeah,
I
great
love chatting
information.
with you guys.
I just I like how what you started off with is just the Accu-Trade piece. Uh, Being able to make those adjustments on the fly basically so quickly for the EV values. I mean, that's scary if you don't have some type of tool, or you don't have your finger on the pulse to know exactly what's going on. I mean, you can really screw up your department real quick.
I've seen it. I won't go into
I
specifics,
bet.
but I've seen a lot of personnel changes over what you just described because somebody didn't have a canary in the coal mine and they got surprised by some of the stuff, and it's sad.
Yeah. 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 Wow.
Yeah,
Yes. Thank you so much, Brian. Really appreciate it, man.
for
Thank
sure.
you. I always love talking to you guys.
All right.
We
Thanks,
appreciate it.
everyone. Have a good weekend,
All
and
right.
hopefully we see you again soon, Brian.